Hello, and welcome to the W.A.I.T channel. What Am I Thinking? A podcast where two sisters share uplifting conversations on fun and sometimes serious topics.
Join us each week by clicking the notification bell and subscribing to our channel. If you enjoy the show, use the share link. It's one of the best ways to expand the conversation.
Hello, and welcome to the W.A.I.T channel. What am I thinking? Well, today we are thinking about the war going on between Israel and the Palestinians. Something that you ever want to hear is war or conflict going on anywhere. Our hearts still break for what's going on in Ukraine with Russia. And as a nation, we have been able to support from afar with that war. But there is a part of me that feels like it may end up being different with this war. And I'm not sure, how many of you know, the history, the long history between these two nations and literally the conflict over land. But Lori, take a minute and give us a brief history of why this is not going to be a quick resolve for this war.
Well, actually, when you said it, the conflict over this land goes back a long time. We're literally going back to the Roman Empire. We're going back to a time before Christ and after Christ. And when Christianity and the Muslim religion became the dominant religions in that region, and for that, or at least that's one of the reasons many of the Jews fled the area, because they feared persecution or even death. And we know that there was a time in the history where Israel longed for its own statehood, and that is what drew them back to that region. But they knew they needed help. They could not do it alone. They sought the help from Western countries. The UK at the time was one of the countries that did help them solidify their place there. But the thing that I think has muddied the waters is that when you return someplace and there's someone still there, and now you are trying to push them out, you kind of do have to ask yourself, land grab, is that right or wrong? And that's a question I guess we can debate at another time. But it was the Palestinian people that were there when Israel returned to reclaim land that they believed was their own, dating back to Abraham's days. So we have Israel there now, surrounded by other nations, by Arab nations that don't want them there. And we have Western nations who believe that they can keep the peace, keep everyone leashed in their areas. And I have to believe that if oil was not in that region, what would be their reason for even being there to help? But now we also have different nations that have nuclear armaments that can even complicate the issue even that much more. So for me, when I look at what's going on today, it's kind of like they have been kicking a can down a road and just kicking it, looking at a situation, knowing it's there, but just hoping that time and the future will resolve issues. And it hasn't. And here we are now. And I know you started off saying that this was a war between Israel and Palestine. I would say they're more so saying it's against Hamas. And that's what is difficult in this situation, because I know the Palestinian people, we've seen the protests in New York, how many of them are saying, but that's not us. We don't support Hamas. Your war's against them, but you're punishing us. And I do get that, and I understand that. But what I will say with these Arab states, that when you harbor terrorism, when you allow it to be there, you can't say that you don't have a friend of a friend or a cousin who has a friend, where there is, even if it's 7 degrees of separation, where something related to these organizations, that in some way makes you complicit. And yes, it's collateral damage. It's something where you are on the fringes. But if there is a connection, you have to understand that with terrorism, we understand terrorists are not a country. But when countries are trying to fight terrorism, where the terrorist organizations are, that's how the country gets pulled in.
Exactly. And as I was saying it, I was thinking I probably should have said Hamas. But thanks for clarifying that. And it's one of those situations where I do understand this long history of even their existence and the role they have played in this conflict between the two countries. Over, like I said, for me, when I think of it, the thing that comes to mind is the Gaza Strip, similar to the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. That's what comes to mind. Not sure. It's probably not. Well, I don't know, because it depends on what's going on in the region, because one of the things we know is that they do go back and forth. There is a way for them to go back and forth between the two areas in that region. Not so much for the demilitarized zone. That doesn't happen over there. But it's just one of those things that I don't know if we're going to be able to stay out of it the longer it goes on, and the more, because we know there are Americans that have died. We know there are Americans that are being kept hostage. So, you mentioned oil, and we know in the Middle East, our interests are not because we just care from a pure heart. There is a financial issue. And now you're right. There is also a safety issue. I think back to what the deal that Obama had put in place with Iran and people not being happy with it. But the thing was, at least we had something to try to do some checks and balances to see what was going on with them when it came to nuclear armament. At this stage, I don't think we really know anything about who has what and who's funding what, because we know Hamas is not doing this alone. We know that others are definitely helping them and funding this process. The scariest part for me is that they're saying there was no prior intelligence to give any warning that this was going to happen. 9/11, they can go back and say all the stuff they missed. So far with this, I'm hearing that they were able to do truly clandestine stuff where no one knew anything. What are you hearing, Lori?
Well, Mr. Putin said that he knew, which
of course he did.
Yeah, which proves that he has superior intelligence over the Mossad and the CIA. So I don't know how true that is.
Fact, of course. Yeah, Bugs Bunny can say he knew too.
But my biggest concern is I can remember growing up in the 80s and taking a political science course, and my piece with the nuclear armaments that we had there was peace because we knew that we would all perish if
Right.
one country. So there was that agreement that we knew you've got 10 nukes, we've got 10 nukes. You stay on your side, I'll stay on my side because of mutual destruction.
Right.
But when you have these terrorist groups that have no regard for life, that's
Right.
when it doesn't matter about destruction. When the images started coming out of Israel, the towns that were invaded, and I was just, it was just so difficult to see how the innocents, young babies, just the way they had to die. And my question is, why? If
Right.
you have a platform, if you're trying to get me to listen to you, if you're trying to get me to see your side of a story, that type of destruction, that type of disregard for life, I can say, you've lost me. You've lost me. I'm not listening past what you are showing me. So all it does is it makes a world look at you, and you cannot legitimize whatever your claim is. And for the Palestinians who are saying, well, look at our towns, look at the total destruction, my heartstrings tug for those young people too, because they're being drawn into something. It's the adults with the big pants in the world. They're the ones that are acting like children. So it's the sheer disregard for life in all of this on both sides. It is so painful to see and watch children being told, at the time of this recording, we know that Israel gave 24 hours. They said 24 hours for the citizens to clear, to evacuate. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
To go in the direction of Egypt. I can't remember if it's that north, south, east or west, but I know they're going in that direction. And to see people on donkey carts, walking. I mean, walking? It looked like one woman had just perhaps given birth, because the man that was carrying the child, it looked like a pretty young child, the way he was carrying this child in a white blanket, and people were helping her, one on either side. So it looked to me like perhaps she had maybe given birth within a week or two. How are they going to utilize that 24 hours to get away? I could barely walk down the hall in the hospital after I had my baby, and you asking me to walk miles and miles. So it's difficult to comprehend all of this. But what I will say is, Westerners and the history of that manifest destiny, this is a large part of it. I think had they been left alone in the Middle East, whether it was tribes fighting each other, it's no different than the continent of Africa, how we look at these areas. And right now, we know that there's skirmishes going on in the continent. We may not hear about them, but there are territorial skirmishes going on. And much of it, I think, if they would have just left them alone to figure it out themselves, I have to ask myself, would we be here? Would we be having this conversation?
Well, I don't know. But in preparation for this show, because we say that we will talk about fun and sometimes serious topics, and this is one of those serious topics, I went back and listened to our first episode as to why we were doing this. And something you said just a minute ago lends to what we talked about then, is that when you get into these tribal mindsets and these tribal stances, we get nowhere, because the lens through which you are looking, listening, hearing things, it's all about your tribe. and there's no room, no space, no anything that you're going to entertain from someone outside of your tribe. And, our version of that, well, it was on January 6th. I was going to say it's not as violent, but we do have our moments when it does get that way, between conservatives and liberals and extremists in our country. And when I saw that the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, our biggest, baddest, newest carrier, had been moved into the region, I once again felt like I don't know if we're going to be able to stay out of this and be able to support from a distance. I feel like we need to brace ourselves as a nation for some uncomfortable times. And we saw there's footage of things that are happening in places like New York, where we know that we are a nation of immigrants. And so being a nation of immigrants, we are no longer telling people we have to do the melting pot and that 100% assimilation. So people get to be who they are and show who they are. And part of that is their freedom of speech, to be able to say who they stand with. And like you said, they're not necessarily saying they stand with Hamas, but they're standing with the citizens who they feel are innocent victims in Palestine. And I understand that. I do. And whether the reasons are right or wrong, that we have a lot of Americans, whatever their reasons for standing with Israel, it is neither here nor there. But it's just so all the division. And so for me, I'm taking heart and putting my faith in God, my higher power, and asking for peace, understanding, and revelation through the process of this one, because this one is hitting in a way that was a little bit unexpected for me. What about you, Lori?
You had sent me a text, and I won't go into depth about the content. I think that what it detailed. I wasn't at a place to really even understand how I was going to process this when I found out what happened, the sneak, sudden, and horrific attack of the Hamas. I wasn't really sure how to process it, because when I even just look at the Ukraine, I still am processing that, and how one man and his ego has almost destroyed. And by that, I mean not their spirit, but the infrastructure of a country. And then, like I said, the other little tit for tat things that are going on around the world, people shooting up their bombs just to show how far their ballistics can go. It's like, it's just so much to process. And then came this, and it just saddens me, because I'm not trying to fuel anything about aliens, but I always ask, when people say, well, where are they? Why haven't they revealed themselves? My mind, I would think, who would want to talk to these people on this planet who can't even get along amongst themselves? Right. So to answer your question, I really have not processed it, because it's too much. I don't understand. One of my favorite words is compromise. And the thing about compromise is, you've got a good compromise when you walk away from the table and you didn't get exactly what you wanted. Right. And that is something I think from mankind. I don't think on an individual level it's lost, but on a larger scale, when we look at our people that are governing countries, I think it's been lost. And that frightens me.
Well, I don't say it's been lost, because that's how you got the division of the land that you got with those countries in the Middle East. That's how you got that. However, the part that gets lost is that you leave and you don't have peace about it. So they were never happy with it, and they never made peace with that, that sense of, I didn't get everything I wanted, but I'm okay.
But would you agree, though, Tracy? And I know this is going to be, I'm just going to very controversial. I'm just going to go on and say it. Wouldn't you agree that religion is one of those key sticking points behind why they're walking away with a compromise, but it not really leaving a good taste in their mouth? Because I think that sometimes some ideologies can be so fanatical that there is no room for just allowing a person to be and to believe.
Well, yeah, for sure. There are those that feel like, the whole world needs to believe like they believe, or they don't even deserve to exist. And when you have that mindset, then yeah, you're not going to be at peace. Because, I think about, the book we co-authored, Fearfully and Wonderfully Made.
Available on Amazon.com.
Yes. That the whole point was, it's okay to be different. Different is just different. It is not bad. Why do we need to all be painted and built? And we're not robots. And so to say your one way is the only way, which is why as a Christian, I can even leave room and have peace about somebody else who believes differently, because guess what? God didn't force his will upon anyone to say you have to do it this way. And so there's room in the tent for everybody to believe how they believe. And in the end, we'll all find out what was right, wrong, good, bad, and different. But in this realm, we got to leave space for everybody to believe how they believe. And so it just makes me sad when someone feels like their way is the only way. And it's like, I don't know if I want to believe that, because guess what? If that's what you truly believe, then you should have peace in knowing that you don't have to knock anybody else down and make them believe what you believe, because what's going on in your life and in your heart is so great and good that you're unbothered by somebody else feeling a different way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it just makes me sad that we have to have this bully mentality when it comes to religion. Our faith should get to be personal and private. And I can do another name drop, like in our fictional book that we did, that we co-wrote, where they were in a space where you could do what you wanted religiously, but the caveat there was you couldn't proselytize, you couldn't tell others about it, but you could have your own personal whatever, and as long as you weren't sharing it, you were okay. So, but it's just one of those things that makes me sad. It makes me sad, and we're a week into this, and I think back to the war with Ukraine and hoping that we wouldn't be a year out saying what's going on over there, but we didn't get that benefit. And I don't know if I can stomach that for this, but I don't have to, because I'm going to try to put my faith in God and trust and believe that however this plays out, it's part of his purpose and plan, and try to have peace about it. you tell us what you're thinking and go ahead and close us out, Lord.
I think that's the best place or best headspace for me as well. I choose to put my faith in God. I choose to send out prayers, blessings, and a hope for peace for all mankind, for understanding, and for quick and immediate resolution to this conflict. So as I close out this show, thank you for listening, and please share, be kind to each other in the comments, and tune back in to find out what we are thinking.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely ours and should be taken as such. Our thoughts are intended purely for entertainment purposes. Please do not take anything we say as fact or advice. Thank you for listening.